On behalf of your host, Steve D., this is Bruce Buffer saying thank you for tuning in to Xtremelyfe. And now, this is the moment Xtremelyfe fans around the world have been waiting for. It's time!
To do a great interview with somebody and then it just doesn't get recorded anyway.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So,
okay, look at that. Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Sure.
It's definitely my honor to have you on. I mean, you're quite an exceptional I'm not going to try to embarrass you here, but you have a whole lot of credentials. I mean, you managed to summit Mount Kilimanjaro. You spent a lot of time. I'm going to let you tell a lot of this stuff because I don't know if I'm going to do it justice. But I'm really excited to have you on. And so first of all, how are things going with all this craziness going on? I mean, the whole world seems like it's just shut down, and that must be driving you crazy as an explorer.
It is actually. All of my Explorers Club colleagues are just chomping at the bit to get back out in the field and to get our passports warmed up again. But in terms of the virus, I think it's something that our ancestors and our grandparents and parents have experienced adversity in their lives of some sort. But recent generations, we've been fortunate to not have such a global event that has really impacted our lives. And I have to say that this has got to be the one thing that I think is just really impacting everybody to some degree. And it's sort of that event of the newer generations, right? So I'm personally doing okay with it. I've been fine. I've been in quarantine for quite a while. I live in Florida, so I'm here at my place in Florida, and I've been getting out and about with my dog a little bit. But just trying to be mindful of some of the more sensitive populations that we have here. And so anytime I go out, I do wear the mask, and I do take the right precautions.
Are you in Florida? What part of Florida are you in?
I'm on the East Coast, where Orlando's in the center of Florida. I'm on the East Coast, kind of directly from Orlando, and then south of it.
Okay. All right, cool. And because I have a lot of friends down in Florida, and I've been reaching out. I'm like, how are things going down there? Because I spend a lot of time down that area. I do a lot of diving down there. And I'm like, I was supposed to be down there actually next week. And unfortunately, that had to get canceled just because of everything. And nobody wants to go down there. And number one, I don't want to go down there and possibly endanger somebody because I'm working up here. I work in the hospital system, so I just kind of want to be mindful of that. The other thing is I hear that they're stopping people at the airport that are coming from this area, putting them in quarantine for 14 days. So I'm like, I'm not going to go down there to spend my whole vacation sitting in some hotel room somewhere that I can't leave.
And that's exactly what would happen when I came back into Florida just at the tail end of March into early April. I had been working up in the New York area and had come back down, and I was thinking, I'm just going to drive it because if I fly, then I'm going to have to stay in quarantine. Sure enough, as soon as I got over the border on I-95, they started channeling traffic into this little, alcove area, and they stopped and they started asking you, where are you coming from? Where have you traveled? And so I started naming first I was in Georgia.
Don't say New York. Don't say New York.
As soon as I said, too much, then it was like, okay, you go over to this line and you got to give me your information. And so that's exactly what I did. And, I honored the quarantine and I stayed inside and just prepared for it and took it easy. I think as explorers, we tend to, kind of take things as they go. And, we kind of look to the future and say, we can get through this adversity right now because we understand that something better, is down the road because of it. So, you put in the investment. What's that?
I said it can't last forever. It has to come with
right. I should hope not.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be in my condo forever, but no, I'm kidding. I had to get out.
Yeah, so I mean, so you came back into Florida, and they what'd they do? They told you had to be in quarantine for 14 days.
Yeah,
they didn't lock you away somewhere or anything like that, right?
No, they had these folks. They had these special little rooms. No, they had these folks from the Florida Health Department, and they had a whole bunch of tents lined up. So you would drive up to one of the tents, and somebody would come up to you with a big mask on, and they had their gloves, and they would hand you the paperwork, and say, okay, you need to fill this out. And they don't really tell you why. You just fill it out and put all the information in, and they say, okay, this is the address that you will be staying at for the next 2 weeks, and we do have your phone number. Yeah. And they tell you you have to stay in quarantine, and they make it explicit. They say if you're caught out, in the public or whatever, for whatever reason, and they don't tell you like how caught, but if for some reason you're found outside of your quarantine, you can be fined $500. And I was like, okay, it's not worth it. I'll just stay home. So yeah, it's kind of crazy.
So they pretty much they're locking people down there with that, and just kind of, especially if you come from this area. And that's kind of the sentiment I got from people I talked to down there. And they're like, yeah, people are flying in from other places, but if you're coming from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, this tri-state area, basically what they've publicized as the epicenter of the viral epidemic in the United States. They've pretty much, they're not letting you go anywhere. You're pretty stuck.
Yeah. So you're up in New York, kind of Connecticut area. Is that where you are?
I'm in New Jersey. Yeah. I'm right across the border from New York. So literally, it takes about 35, 40 minutes to get to New York from my house. So, and it's kind of interesting because I see New York plates driving all over New Jersey right now. So nobody's blocking that from happening. But
yeah, no, a lot of my friends that were in the city, in Manhattan, have gotten out of the city and taken up rentals or staying with family or something outside of the city. So they
Probably
feel like it's easier.
You're probably better off. The bad thing about this, scariest thing about this virus is that you don't show any symptoms for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And you are able to spread it pretty, intensely to other people. And there's like just a whole lot we don't know, and I think there's a whole lot we don't know on a whole lot of levels, but, and we won't go into that whole political debate stuff and all the crazy.
There's
conspiracy theories all over the place.
I mean, and Steve, what does it say about our political environment right now whenever a pandemic and a virus can be politicized? It says a lot. It speaks a lot to about our political environment and ecosystem. And I really hope that, some things that should be unifying us, it seems like there are so many things that should be unifying us, not even just as Americans, but as, species, are for some reason just, dividing us, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some incredible acts of heroism and bravery and all that, but I've also seen some insanity because of all this. And, what you have is a couple real bad things going on at the same time. Both, economically, this is terrible.
Right.
The virus itself is terrible. Now people are like, is the cure worse than the disease itself?
Yeah.
It's keeping the country on lockdown, stopping the economy. I got a lot of friends in the travel industry who are dying right now. They're literally, bleeding money and have no way and don't know if they're going to be able to rebuild. That's the crazy thing about it. And then you have an election year at the same time with a with an incredibly popular president on one side and an incredibly unpopular president on the other side. So there's your divide right there. And there's the why, like I said, in my opinion, why it's being politicized so greatly is because the left has an agenda, the right has an agenda, and everybody's using it to their advantage. And unfortunately, we're caught in the middle of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So. And those of us who truly are in the middle, are, it's hard to see, the extremes, come into play and apply their rhetoric, to something that we just really need to work together and move ahead and come out the better for it on the other end with some, retrospective and some lessons learned. So, my sense is that, as an explorer, we explorers tend to, we don't plan for it, but we do tend to experience adversity, in our pursuit of knowledge and understanding. And, again, we understand that when we go through those really hard times, there's a greater reason for it. And whenever we go through the hard times, they're finite, eventually they will end, and we will have a better experience afterwards. So, the explorer's mentality on something like a pandemic or adversity and hardship is very different, I think, than most people. Most people are like, I shouldn't have to go through this. But, sometimes you do have to go through things, and sometimes you do have to, have your will tested to really grow and to understand, what you're capable of, and push your own personal mental boundaries of what's possible in your own life.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a firm believer in conflict in most cases leads to resolution, and resolution leads to better times, right? So you're going to end up at some point. I think everything swings both ways. They end up, the pendulum moves. It goes from this side to that side. I've always had the belief, and I have friends that are on the right and on the left, and I want to. Well, this will be probably my last statement on the politics stuff because we got a lot of other better stuff to talk about, right? But I'm neither right or left. I'm in the middle, very much in the middle. I have some very left-wing beliefs, and I have some very right-wing beliefs. Right. And I think most people in general are that way. However, the loudest voices are on the extreme sides of both. Exactly. Right. And they're screaming from the rooftops and trying to bend everybody to their will, which I think on either side is a terrible thing.
Yeah. So, it's the drum beating, the drum beating at the extremes. And I think that the only way to kind of not fix that, but the only way to address it is for those of us who are sort of in the middle on things, and kind of approach these things with more of a rational problem-solving perspective. Really need to speak our minds about it, and in a way that encourages other people to kind of think rationally and to use data-founded, to let data sort of shape out their opinions and their mindset on things. So as an engineer, that's kind of how I live and how I operate. I'm very, data centric and data driven. And, to me, if I'm, and two, I have a little saying, it's like opinions are stubborn, or facts are stubborn things, but opinions are more stubborn. So you kind of have to learn the difference between what is a fact and what is somebody's opinion, and then even in the constructs of a social media conversation or a comment thread, you have, it's, I think that's lost on some people is that, facts are very stubborn. There are facts, and that is such a thing. And then, we have opinions, and they're far more stubborn than facts.
Oh yeah. Well, one of my favorite statements, and this is, and I fall into it sometimes too on social media. I get into these little battles with people for some reason. I say to myself, what the hell am I doing? Why am I even in this? It's a waste of time. I'm not going to change their opinion. They're not going to change mine. And I just don't know why I get sucked into it sometimes. And sometimes I put something out there just to see how people are going to react to it. And I think, because I wouldn't say it's trolling. I wouldn't say it's trolling, but I would say it's more of an experiment of humanity. Okay. That's what I would call it. If I were to put on an explorer hat, that's probably how I would phrase it, right?
I'm testing humanity with this inflammatory post. Is that what you're saying?
Sometimes, yeah, because I do think, sometimes it's good to stir things up a little bit. I think people should see all information, not just some of it. Right. And make their own decisions. I don't think we should be guided to certain information and saying, hey, this is the only thing you should look at. But look at this, too. And you make your own choice. Unfortunately, one of two things is going on. Either they think we're too stupid to do that, or they think we're too smart and we're going to see through something. So one of two reasons why they limit information like that. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. So I tend to go back to Carl Sagan, the great Carl Sagan, who had
wondered about everything.
The baloney detector. He had a list of that he called a baloney detector, and you can Google it. But it's basically a pointed list of how to sort of test your own theories and test your own thoughts, and hypotheses about things.
That's cool. What's it called again?
If you Google Carl Sagan's baloney list, this will come up. Okay. It's his list of how to test your own opinions and your own thoughts about something. And also, whenever you're listening to somebody else's argument, what kind of argument are they using and why are they using it? So it's sort of like, looking at an argument piece or a hypothesis from a full perspective, your own perspective, and also those coming in from the outside and how they might argue against it. So check it out. It's definitely worth it, and it'll change your perspective on how you approach opinion-based conversations with people.
Yeah.
So it's pretty fascinating to read.
That's awesome. One of my favorite statements is by Bill Murray, and he said, to win an argument with an intelligent person is extremely hard. To win an argument with a stupid person is impossible. So it's like, I've repeated that so many times I can't even tell you because I just love it's just such a accurate
Yeah, I feel like
depiction.
Facebook should put that on every single time we log into our accounts. By the way, just a little banner notification.
You're not going to win. There's no way you have no chance of winning. You're just going to aggravate yourself. Get out now. That should be.
Yeah, Facebook would do us all a favor if they could just put that disclaimer as soon as we log in. Just friendly reminder. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
awesome. So about you, let's get into the nuts and bolts of why we're even here and what we're talking about. Because obviously you're extremely intelligent. You can talk on a lot of different topics. You have an incredible career in, what got you into engineering? I mean, that's kind of one of those things where you have to be really, and you said you're a data-driven person. What made you decide, and then graduate from Harvard with a degree in engineering, which is.
So I started my engineering career. I started with the Department of Defense, and I took a project with the Department of State on a very sensitive international narcotics and law enforcement effort. And that's really where I got my first exposure into, larger scale data sets and how they can be applied to, intelligence and, how it can be actionable and, how you can pull from different pieces of data and put them together to create a larger picture that can be used to actually understand what has happened, but also sort of predict what can come to the future. So that was a pretty intensive project. And then with the Department of State, I was with the Nuclear Treaty Monitoring Directorate. And that's a really neat system. It's a global system that monitors our globe for seismic activity. And that data actually supports the USGS material whenever, we get a tweet that says, oh, there was a earthquake in Indonesia, so that system picks up that information first and is first scrubbed by this project that I was on. And what it's looking for is natural versus man-made activity, seismic activity. It has a very predictable seismic signature. Just to dumb it down for myself, just looking for like different type, maybe blasts or something from different areas or testing. Exactly. Things like that. Okay. Yeah. So seismic signature is predictable, right? Whenever an impact happens, there's a predictable seismic pattern that occurs on that within whatever medium on which the impact occurs. So without getting too technical,
you got to talk down to me on this because I don't.
I'll try to.
Use very small words.
I'll smooth it out for you. So what happens is if we have an earthquake, the signature kind of starts off, earthquakes kind of rumble a little bit first, and then they kind of get into this big kind of wah, wah, wah sort of thing. That appears in a seismic pattern, right? And it starts to go off and go crazy. A man-made impact will be very smooth and then pow, and then come down and then have some attenuation after that. So that's a signature whenever you have a predictable seismic activity based on an occurrence. And so, that was, early on in my engineering career, I was able to go out and, work with that kind of team and do some R&D field engineering and the data collection that came out of that. Since then, I've been able to lend that data collection set to different nonprofits, going out to the field to do different types of, understandings of new things, right? So I was on an advisory council for the Combat Wounded Veterans Challenge team for 10 years. And we did, we were doing biometric studies of the impacts of the atmospheric anomalies on residual limbs. So soldiers who have been drastically injured and, have had amputations, we would take them, diving because that creates, a certain atmospheric impact. It creates a lot of pressure on that limb. And then going up to Kilimanjaro, high altitudes, takes pressure off of the limb, because there's less pressure at altitude. So we would go and do these, expeditions and take biometrics, along the way and do studies, that had a larger data consumer out of that.
That's so, that sounds like incredibly interesting work. And especially, I'm very interested in, especially you said you had done some work with the DEA. And working that field, and that's the field I'm in. I'm not in law enforcement, but I'm a therapist. I specialize in addiction treatment in my regular job. That's what I do when I'm not podcasting or going to fights or any of that other stuff that I do.
So the INLFL, which is the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Project, is under the Department of State. So it's not. There might be some crossover with the DEA.
Oh, okay.
But they have different initiatives, going on. And right now, I know that their big focus is on anti-poaching.
Yeah, and it's it's a huge issue. And like I said, and then working with amputees and trying to, what were some of the findings? Did you guys find that certain atmosphere, I mean, I know as a diver, you go down different, every 30 feet you go down atmospheres, right? So, and then going up to Kilimanjaro I'm guessing you took amputees up there with you, as you said, and did, biometric testing. Did you come up with any kind of interesting conclusions out of that, or?
Yeah, so predictably, the tissue in the residual limb actually expands and contracts depending on how much pressure is on there, just whenever without exertion. So, we would take measurements in the morning before they even stood up. It's a night of sleeping, and then, the next morning you're in there doing your measurements, and before they would move. And so you're getting sort of a baseline of non-activity, and then once activity happens, the finding was that there was a greater magnitude of change depending on the amount of activity. So you have some activity that causes swelling. It's like when you work out, you kind of get a little buffed up. And then afterwards, it goes down. And so, but we found that those conditions were sort of magnified based on the altitude impact.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
So definitely sense. And,
and I can tell you the reason that's important, Steve, is because most of these guys have a pocket in their prosthetic limb, and the pocket tends to be pretty stable. It's a hard pocket that the leg sits in, and if the size of the residual limb is changing within the pocket, it can create an uncomfortable situation if the leg is swollen and the pocket doesn't change
fit right.
hard piece. Yeah. Or if it contracts too much and then there's movement, and it's like when you get a blister, really painful blister in your shoes, same thing, but imagine that on your upper thigh. So it's important that you understand the swelling factor, that happens in the residual limb so that it can remain as stable as possible, but they're trying to work on a pocket that's dynamic that can respond to that the dynamic edema that happens within the residual limb.
That's great. Yeah, no, it's perfect. That makes perfect sense, and it's great. I mean, I have a lot of fascination with that. I've worked with veterans and amputees over my career at times too, and one of the big things I'm very interested in is phantom pain, because they do experience phantom pain a lot of times, and that's basically a wiring of the brain that continues to stay wired in a certain way, thinks the limb's still there, so there's phantom pain there. And there's ways using reflection boxes, things like that, to kind of try to alleviate that pain. And it does work pretty well. I mean, what you do is you basically rewire the brain, which is amazing, being able to do that.
Yeah. Have they done any VR application in that arena yet to see if that can relieve phantom pain or sort of rewire the brain at all?
Yeah, VR is being used in a whole lot of different modalities now. I don't know every study that's going on right now. I do know that VR is being used by our military heavily for PTSD. To kind of check resilience, to see if there's resilience in PTSD, to see if a soldier is predisposition or predisposed to getting PTSD from combat situations. So that's kind of how they're using it now. It's also being used in some traumas. We're actually looking at ways to use it in addiction treatment. There's a professor out of Tulane University named Patrick Bordnick, who is kind of like the guy when it comes to VR and addiction treatment. So it's pretty interesting. He has some simulations, and there's some companies actually producing some boxes now that can be used in the treatment of addiction. So yeah, they're trying to apply it to a whole lot of different things. And one of the things I really like about it is that you can put somebody in a situation in virtual reality and have them walk through it and kind of coach them through it, which is amazing, to put them in a situation where they walk into a bar, but they're an alcoholic, and, and you have all that stimuli going on around them. And then you're right there with them in a safe scenario.
Yeah.
Where they're not going to actually, have a drink at that point. You can use a group, have a group of people around them while they're walking through it. How do you feel? What do you think? What is going on right now? Where are you at emotionally? And have people walk them through it and then come up with ways to get away from. I mean, of course, the best thing to do is if you're an alcoholic, don't go to a bar, but or don't go around alcohol. But in our society today, it's almost impossible to manage to stay away from everything. So you have to develop skills to be able to cope and walk away from it without having that drink or do that drug or whatever it is that you're exposed to at that time. So there's a lot of interesting things going on.
Yeah, so they basically help create a perceived support network around them that they can apply, especially in those moments of really, intense challenge, to their resilience. That makes sense.
High stress. And, we're predicting a big uptick in addiction right after all this stuff. I mean, right now, just because of financial issues, the stress, the constant bombardment with negativity, the isolation is terrible for addicted people. Terrible. And basically all the 12-step meetings, because you can't have gatherings. So all the meetings are pretty much not happening. They're all happening online, which I've never been a huge fan of online meetings because the person behind the other computer could be sitting there having a drink while they're talking to you.
Yeah.
You don't know. But what we have right now, and it's basically all we can do. So it's a very complicated and difficult time, especially people suffering with mental illness and addiction and things like that, because they literally do not do well in these types of situations, and they need a lot more support. So, getting away from that.
Sorry, we diverged.
It's all right. Hey, you know what? I'd rather us have way too much to talk about than sit here and not have anything to talk.
We can turn a couple of episodes on. We can do a couple of episodes here, the serious one and the fun one. So whatever you want.
Hey, sometimes. Hey, there's been conversations I've had. I had I think TJ DeSantis on here, and I had him on here, and we were talking for over an hour. It was like, it's just sometimes that's the way it goes. I mean, I don't put any real time frame on it. And if I have to, I chop it up a bit, and then I'll put it in, 2 different episodes, or I'll just leave an hour episode up. It doesn't matter. I try to keep it down to 30 minutes because the reason being is people drive to work and home, and generally they have about a 15, 20-minute ride to work and home, and that's when they listen to podcasts.
Sure.
So they listen to a whole podcast and just one ride from work and back, generally. So so let's talk about your work with the tribe out in
yeah, okay.
I'm super interested in this, and I actually expected this to come up quick, but I we got into so many other things, and you have so many interesting thoughts that I just like getting into that stuff, and I love conversations with intelligent people, so so I tend to hold people hostage on that stuff, but so that being said. Tell your story. Tell me about the tribe and how you ended up there, and who were they, and how you end up working with them.
Yeah. So the tribe that you're referring to is the Matisse tribe, and they live in a place called the Yavari River Valley, and that's in western Brazil. It's a territory about the size of Austria, and about 5,000 or so indigenous people live in that region, and it's specifically for indigenous tribes. They vary in degree from, those who have been heavily contacted to some who still haven't been contacted at all. So FUNAI is the governing, the agency within Brazil that is charged with making sure that, the health of the indigenous people remain intact, and that they have enough territory, and that they have what they need to stay and live the way that they want to live, and the way that that they have lived traditionally. So I was contacted by an individual who was organizing a trip down there. They were contacted by somebody else. All in all, it took about 1.5 years to organize, and we went down to collect, understand, and it was a data collection. We went down to understand what plant and animal materials they use in their diets and in their rituals, and in some of their textiles and some of the things that they make. So we so we went down there in February of 2018, and there was about 5 of us, and we had a photographer, several photographers, we had filmmakers. All of us were data collection individuals. We had one retired IBM executive who was also an engineer. So the data element of it was great. We slept in the jungle with them. They had their own sort of outpost area. They came out of their territory to meet us, and it took them 5 days journey by boat to come and meet us.
Wow.
And it took us 1 day journey. Yeah, it took us 1 day journey by boat to go to connect at the meetup point. So we finally, got together. We set up our hammocks. You can't really sleep on the jungle floor safely out there. It's just
creepy
raw jungle.
running around.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. It's just really raw jungle. So you have to sleep in a hammock. But the hammock that I have is actually like a swinging one-person tent. So you hang it up, and it's got a kind of a mesh box over it that keeps bugs out, and then it's got a rain fly that goes over that. So it's sort of like a one-person hanging tent, which is really nice. I tend to travel pretty light, whenever I go into those situations. And, I had with me a large K2 waterproof camera bag, and it had all my equipment in it. And for some reason, every day I had nothing natural in that bag. And for some reason, every single day, it would just be inundated with termites. They couldn't get in because it was so well sealed, right? But it would just be coated and covered with termites. Now, I've taken that bag everywhere. It's been out to Africa. It's been down into the Yucatan, into the far reaches, there, and into South America, in other areas. That bag's been a lot of places, but the termites love that bag. They would make their little trails up the side of it, up the handle, every single morning. I'd have to have somebody to come and clean this thing off. I don't want to open it up and have them all in my camera gear. So,
do you have any idea why they were so attracted to it, or they just?
No idea. We never figured it out. I even, the bug spray that we use out there is like, it's got all kinds of warning labels on it. Don't drink this stuff. Don't even put it on your skin if you can avoid it. But you need that kind of bug spray. You need that power, right?
Nuclear bug spray you had going.
Yeah, it's some kind of peace of mind, let me tell you. So we had these termites, and I would spray my K2 bag every single day with this stuff before I would go to bed. And still, the termites would persist. They would get on there, and they would just make their little tunnels. They would build their little structures, and they would, they would try to get into this bag every day. And we happened to be there in the rainy season, so it was just, mud and wetness, and it was just like being in a sauna, constantly. So yeah, so you kind of learn how to, dress and what's worth doing and what's not,
Yeah.
So I have an expedition sponsor, Rail Riders Clothing, if I can give them a little shout out. They specialize in yachting gear, and they outfit my expedition team with very rugged technical clothing every time we go out. And, the pants are amazing. They fit me really well. I've got a certain, configuration that makes me hard to fit. And these clothes for technical clothing do a wonderful job. They've got very rugged shirts, so I'm always covered, with long sleeve shirts and very long pants and welly boots whenever I'm out in those areas. But, it's got sunscreen in it. It's got the Promethean already with the bug spray, embedded in the fabric. So that's kind of nice too.
What are they called again? What's the name of the company?
Rail Riders.
Rail Riders. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's very clear out there, because it's important to shout out to your sponsors.
Yeah, and they're boating. They started off as a boating company, like a company that creates clothing for the boating crowd or the boating community. And rail riders are those guys that get out apparently on yachts on that really long, piece of rail to kind of stabilize the yacht when it's going at high speed making a turn. So that's always, that's a fun.
So they got rugged clothes.
I know. Special clothes for that, let me tell you.
Special clothes. Awesome.
But no, their technical clothing is great. So, this is the environment. These are the conditions we're working in. It's the raw jungle. And so the Matisse sent out a group of about 25 or so people, and they had some elders that they had family members, they had women, they had children with them. And we were able to join them, on hunting trips. They shared with us how their animal traps work and the types of animals that they collect. Everything's natural and man-made. So the Matisse are interesting. They have an interesting relationship with pain. So they have these rituals where they, they subject themselves to pain so that they can practice the bitter and the sweet, right? So they have sort of a yin-yang sort of approach to managing their expectations in life. And so this is all part of it, is subjecting themselves to pain. I mean, they don't wear shoes, they don't wear much in terms of clothing. So, they are highly exposed to the elements, and, they have to they subject themselves to pain to relieve their fear of it. And so one of the ceremonies was a whipping ceremony called the Marawin. And a couple of the elders will go and paint themselves up in this black clay and tie all kinds of ferns around their head and around their body. And then they come out with these incredibly awful masks. And I'll show you. I have one of the masks here.
Oh, there's a prop.
Yeah,
wow.
Prop. So the matisse, and this is made of a very dense clay, and it's a low fire clay. So the matisse, they actually, and I can share some photos with you if you like. So the matisse they pierce the sides of their nose right here, and on their outside of their nostrils, and they put these long black thorns. And so the long black thorns, this represents those thorns. Okay. And then they also harvest a kind of a dandelion type of a seed pod that produces a soft filament, almost like cotton. And they use that, down there at the bottom to adorn their masks also. So this is just one of the masks, but it's very thick, kind of ominous looking. Yeah. So that's one of the masks.
And that was, I guess, a consolation prize. Here you go. You take a mask home with you.
Let me tell you, they wanted me to get whipped, and I refused to get whipped. I said, no, I'm just here to document. I'm really just here to take the data. I'm not here to be whipped. Thank you so much.
I'm not going to be whipped here.
Yeah. So a couple of the guys in our expedition team were, and one of them, the whipping piece is the spine of a palm frond, a very long palm frond that's about 2 meters long. And they take off all the leaves off the side, so you just left with that really thin, rigid spine. And they whip it around. They make this horrible ripping sound out of it. And the tribe will stand there and subject themselves to this whipping. And the elder will take and just whip, the person around the lower back. And the soft part of the frond will come and smack them along the stomach and leave like this gash that just sort of like slowly seeps blood. And it sounds awesome, right? It's like, this is exactly how I'm going to spend my Saturday morning. And
we think we got it rough over here.
I know, right? Yeah, you think you got to stay inside in quarantine for 2 weeks? Come on. You're not kidding.
I think people would voluntarily stay in quarantine if they knew they had it, if they were going to, look, you could come out, but here's what we're going to do.
You can take the smacking along your lower back with a palm frond, or you can stay inside and watch Netflix for 2 weeks. It's your choice.
You decide.
Right. Yeah. So now we got it so easy here, don't we? So one of our guys actually did that, and he got a little bit of a staph infection, like on the front of his stomach. So it's not like we're out in clean conditions, right? Yeah. So we have medical supplies and stuff with us. Yeah. So another thing that they do is they put their hand in ant beds. So there's a certain type of ant that lives at the base of a peach palm, and these ants are really tiny, and they sting, right? So it's almost like, it's not like a bee sting, but it's almost like an electrical charge kind of sting. So if you've ever been zapped by something, in your, coming out of the wall, an outlet or something, it's kind of like that, but it actually hurts a little bit. So they will put their hands inside, they'll stap up the nest, right? So they'll smack the nest and get the ants all agitated, and then they'll put their hands on the nest. And
press them off first.
I'm like, what are you guys doing?
It's like a really wacky college party.
I'm telling you, it's like Tridels did this,
Well, it's like, pledge, you're going to stick your hand in this.
It was interesting to see the reactions, and they kind of laugh, whenever people, get there and start going, ow, 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 they start laughing at each other for it, so they find a little bit of humor. It's like, oh, let's amuse ourselves, So they amused them, it was an amusing event to them, but it was something that they did to sort of test their will against pain.
And they do that multiple times throughout their life, right? Because that's I think I was reading something about that or watching something about that, where they do that from, it's like kind of like a rite of passage. Every so many years or something, they do that. Right? Is that correct? Or
That is correct. Well, it's more or less, it's something that they do. I don't know that it's that particular ritual as a rite of passage, but it's just something that they do. And it seemed rather spontaneous whenever we did it. So they didn't give us any context. They just said, here, put your hand in here. Here's how we do it. And
so did that? You stuck your hand in it? Did you stick your hand in there?
You know, I'm a data collector. I don't do that.
I don't participate. I just watch.
Okay, I'm just here to get the I did do a couple of things though, and I'll share that with you. So so the ant piece was funny, and you know that all the kids do it. You know, the little, even down to the little kids, they all do it. They're reticent, you know, and they don't want to do it, and they know it hurts. But it's interesting because by the time they get to about 10 to 14 years, right in that age range, they're very adverse. You know, they're like, ew, I don't want to do it. You know, they start to understand their free will in the matter. And, you know, I witnessed some of them kind of like, you know, shying back and saying, no, I'm not going to do it. But, you know, the older folks would encourage them by, you know, put your hand in there.
Let me just stick this in here for you.
Yeah, no, this is how you do it. This is how you face pain. So, yeah. So, and you know, we did have a moment early on where we joined them to hunt for breakfast. And, you know, they, as part of their food sourcing, because they rely on, you know, the jungle, for the Amazon jungle, for their food and for their sustenance, for their textiles, for everything. And so one of the things we did was we went out on a monkey hunt, and they killed a monkey. And there's a couple of different, I've got a couple of different types of monkey in mind as to what it was. I think it was a saku monkey. And they're a smaller primate, not very tiny, but they're pretty small, about the size of a human torso. And, you know, so that was a little bit of a heartbreaking thing, you know, and they use the blowgun. So it's about a 3-meter blowgun, and they use the poison dart. And it's amazing that they can even see the primate way up in the canopy. But, you know, they hold these you know, 9-foot, 3-meter blowguns. And they have these poison darts. So their poison is called curare. They make it out of a certain vine, and we documented that process. And yeah, it's a neurotoxin, and it pierces the primate, and the end of it breaks off. They score it a little bit, so the end of the dart breaks off, and the tip stays embedded with the curare, with poison. Then it's a chase through the canopy as the primate, the neurotoxin takes effect, and the primate eventually falls, and then they go collect it, and they look for the dart, and they, you know, do their best. So
that's just a matter of keeping your eye on it until it eventually falls,
right,
from the canopy.
Yeah, and so they tagged one, they darted one, and I was keeping pace and keeping front with the 2 elders that had taken it, and immediately, you know, they, without any warning, and this is the thick jungle, you know, and I'm laden with camera gear, and it's raining. And, you know, I've got my camera all, you know, protected for the rain. And they took out sprinting through the jungle. I'm like, oh, you know, so I ended up having to run, you know, and try to keep up with these guys, you know, and they have no shoes on. I'm just full of stuff and soaking wet. And we're bounding through the jungle, you know, here and there, and you know, trying to keep up with this little primate. And and sure enough, you know, eventually we caught up to it. I lost sight of the guys a couple of times, you know, and I had to just keep running. I didn't know if they had veered to the left or to the right. I was just,
the right direction.
Yeah, I was just lucky that I was able to find them. I was like, okay, I got my whistle. I got my little emergency whistle if I need. I'm telling you, I know how to be lost.
Well, as an explorer and having so many adventures like you do, I think that's kind of like a normal thing for you just to, right? It's
okay to get lost, because you just have to know how to be lost and how to be found. You know, as long as you can take care of yourself while you're lost and you know how to be found, it's okay to get lost.
Well, it's funny because you're in the middle of the Amazon, running around, getting lost in the Amazon.
Right.
And, you know, you find your way out, you have your whistle, you do this thing. I guess they found you, right? And you know, it's funny because in the United States, people get lost in their own woods near their house. I mean, it's like
on a hiking trail,
and you don't see them for 3-4 days. They're gone for like a week.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. But no, I ended up finding them. You know, I kept forward, and I kind of, you know, watched where they had gone, and I saw some, you know, some broken material in the plant foliage, and so I knew where they were, and I was only out of sight for maybe 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. It wasn't, you know, anything drastic, but there is that moment where you're like, you know, that kind of panicky moment where you think, this could be a book, you know.
I'm in the jungle, by myself. Nobody's around, and there's all kinds of things here who can kill me.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I knew what they were eating, but I wasn't adept enough to identify what they were eating. So I'm like taking like a quick 2.5 second inventory of what I got in my bag. Do I have enough water? Do I have enough food? Can I make a fire? But the biggest thing is that whistle. The whistle is an important piece. You can easily be found with the whistle, so it's always important to have. So what they do when they hunt is the guys all carry with them a quiver, right? And this is
you're like central of
what?
You got the props going.
Oh yeah, man, this is got some cool stuff, right?
Oh, it's awesome, awesome, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a quiver, and it contains a fire making kit inside of it here. The whole structure is made of one section of bamboo. It's very solid and very lightweight. I'll tell you a little bit about the construction here. This is their textile, and it has a very distinctive sort of woven pattern to it. It's dimpled. I don't know if you can see it that well, but they make it. Yeah, they make it out of harvesting very fine fibers out of the flat parts of palms. So they split the palms length or widthwise, and there's some pulpy stuff in there, and they harvest out the fibers and they quickly weave this. They make bracelets, ankle bracelets. They make straps, and basically all their textiles and bindings and sashings. This is a nice little mesh sack that it's pretty common. It's filled with that cotton material that we looked at on the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they harvest that. So, and this piece right here normally holds a bunch of clay, and the clay is kind of special.
A jaw, right? It's a jaw?
This is a monkey jaw right here. Yeah. And you can still see the teeth and everything on it, the back end, right? So it's the lower mandible, the lower jaw of a monkey, a primate. And what they do, this piece right here normally carries a chunk of clay, and the clay that they use is a clay that's an offcast of a ground cicada. So it's a ground bug that goes in and it burrows down in, and then it eats like the dirt. And then it sends it out, and it creates this really kind of interesting looking column of this really special dirt. It's almost like it dries. It's very dehydrating. So if you put it on your skin, it will dry your skin out really fast. So they take a chunk of this clay and they stick it in there. And then they use these piranha jaws. You see that?
Piranha jaw? Wow.
Yeah, 2 piranha jaws here, right? One on each side. Okay, and they're very sharp. Piranha teeth are extremely sharp. Even these are still very sharp.
Yeah.
So piranha jaws are used to score a dart, and these are one of the darts. They're normally tipped with curare, okay? And you can see how long it is. I mean, it's a pretty long little
Now, there's
thing.
no curare on that one, right? So you're not
no curare on this particular one. Yeah.
You're not going to fall out, and I'm going to have to try to figure out how to call 911 where you're at.
Yeah. So what they do, this is loaded down into the blowgun. And what they do first is they score it. They score the end of the tip right in here, right about here. They score it with the piranha teeth, okay?
Yep.
And then they score around it, and they make a really weak point. And then they take and they put a little disc of the clay around it, and they cover the disc in the soft cottony material. And what that does is the disc actually plugs up the inside of it creates an air plug on the inside of the blowgun. So when they blow into it, it creates pressure behind the dart, and it sends the dart up through the blowgun.
Wow. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat thing. They showed us how to use the blowgun, and it's actually, it doesn't take a lot of air, lung pressure to force a dart up out of the gun. It's amazing. It's amazingly efficient. And once in the hands of a skilled user, I'm not, it is very accurate. In my hands, not so much.
Not so accurate in your hands with that. Yeah, but I could see as an engineer though how this would really appeal to your sense of exploration and wanting of information. I could see how this is something that appeals to your nature.
Right, and it's fascinating because everything that they use to make these is right there in their territory. This is pitch from a type of birch tree, and it's the same pitch that they use to make the ink for their tattoos. So and it's very hard and very rigid. These things last a long time. And they take great pride in making their own materials, from scratch. They take great pride in ownership of that, and they're all unique to the individual maker. So we're very, very lucky to get these.
Yeah, that's neat. And now, do they have to hunt? They hunt, I guess, every meal, right? Every meal they go out, they spend their morning, I guess, hunting, and then their afternoon hunting. And, basically that's kind of like their way of life. And, I always think in my mind, and whenever I go out on expedition or do anything as well, and I haven't been on half of what you've been on, but I go on a lot of shark expeditions, and I'm always kind of like thinking to myself, whenever I meet people in other places, I'm like, we're complaining about having to drive a half hour to the store or 20 minutes to the store just to get, and we go buy food and we come back and we eat whatever. These people have to go out every morning, and they may not find food.
Right.
I mean,
they're hunter-gatherers, right? So they can gather food. They have plenty of, food products and fruits and roots and that they eat, and bulbs. And so they know. And then they also set traps, so they have the little, they have small game that they collect. They have certain types of deer, small deer that run, through those areas. And so they actually do set up, some pretty elaborate traps that are very deadly. And they also set those traps up for, if they have tribe members, other tribes, that they're worried coming into their territory. They also set traps for human invaders. So, that's why another reason we stuck close to them.
And that's why you got to be careful when you get lost in the woods out there by yourself.
No, I mean, these things, they make these huge bow and arrows, and they make these spikes out of the bamboo. They shave the bamboo down so that it's sort of a bladed point, and is extremely sharp, and it's extremely strong. So one of the things that they also do is they make adornments. And one of the things that we got was a monkey tooth necklace. This is a necklace made entirely of monkey teeth.
Wow.
And they wear these, on their arms. They wear this on their necks.
Is there any particular reason, or they're just jewelry, or is there any kind of belief that goes with it? Or
yeah, it's just jewelry.
Okay.
So yeah,
cool. It's very neat.
I wear this with my beautiful red Marilyn Monroe gown.
That's great. Well, that was the intended attire for that necklace.
Oh yeah, it was totally intended. Yeah. So I love it. It's wonderful. It's it's pretty special to me. So the way that I got all these back in through customs is
I hid them.
Yeah, I totally made this on my own. Is I actually put them into just a basic tourist shopping bag, like a little plastic shopping bag.
I like you bought it at like a little
tourist. Yeah, I wrapped them up as if I had bought them at a tourist shop, and no troubles at all. I hand carried it with me just like it was part of my personal bags. But yeah,
that's awesome. Great. Yeah. So hopefully nobody from customs is going to watch this video.
Yeah, meanwhile, TSA is like, we're putting her right in that system.
Yeah, you are now on the watch list. You are now added to the watch list over there. But that's amazing. Now, you said that they worry about human invaders too. Is there a lot of is there a warring tribe? I mean, is there any kind of danger there? I mean, because you're going there. And a lot of us would be like, hey, I better do some research here and figure out if I'm going to be possibly killed in this situation. So.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. The Matisse tribe, that's been documented that they had a conflict with a neighboring tribe called the Karubo. And the Karubo tribe, there had been some exchange revenge killings, over the years. I think that has since stopped, but that has been documented. And so as we, in our outpost camp in working with the Matisse, we learned later that the Karubo, we were actually really close to the Karubo territory. So if they had seen us out, through trekking with the, with the Matisse, that could have been problematic. Yeah. So, to say the least.
Could have been a little problematic, yeah.
Yeah, I could have been looking for poison darts in our. So no, it was, it was an element of concern, but it wasn't something that we were overly worried about. The thing that I was worried about was having to bathe in a piranha and snake infested water. That was.
Tell me about that, because we were talking about that the other day on the phone.
Yeah.
And it was like, are you nuts? I go, hey, people think I'm crazy for going in the water with sharks and feeding sharks from hand and all that stuff. But
I can see those.
You know, I don't know. And sometimes I think it's just a matter of perspective. When you're there, you see that the situation is a little bit different than what people perceive it to be. And maybe my perception is a little different now, but I'm thinking of piranhas like, you hear about them eating a whole cow walking across a river, that kind of thing. And then you're jumping in the water with them. So tell me about that.
So they're pretty, I would imagine they're pretty well fed. But, certain parts of the Amazon River, not on the menu. I'm not on the menu. So certain parts of the Amazon are fairly clear, but then other parts of it are really turbid. And it's almost like the only thing I can equate it to is like a burnt orange milk. That's kind of the level of turbidity. And it's just from the minerals and the runoff that's in that really rich Amazonian soil. So those waters, are healthy. They're fast moving. And believe it or not, they're really cold. It's actually very cold water. So sometimes you just got to get in there and just cool off. And, but you try not to move around too much, but I was, we were kind of dared to get into the water. So
they're not suckering you into the water.
It's a little unnerving, it's like you're just hypersensitive and you're hyper aware of like everything that's like touching, because you can't see. I mean, anything that's in the water, you just can't see it. I mean, I've been into underwater cave systems in Mexico that are filled with baguano, and it looks like coffee. The water looks like coffee. You're putting like a 3,000 lumen, light right under the water, and as soon as it gets half a meter in, it's just black. You can't see it.
You can't see nothing.
This is worse. I mean, it's so much. It's like milk. Milk is completely opaque.
Which is great for predatory fish because they love that. You can't see them coming.
Caiman snakes, they all love it. Yeah, they're just going by vibrations. So so I got into the water, and the boat that we had taken out was sort of a low bottom. Now here in Florida we call them Johnny boats, but there's no daft, right? It's just kind of a flat bottom boat, and that's what we had taken. So got into the water with one of my expedition buddies, and he was in the water and I was in the water. We're like, something's gonna eat us. And it was kind of like, we got to do this just to say we did it. So he jumped, grabs the side of the boat and gets back up after about 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm like, wait a second, I don't have
5 or 10 minutes. I'd have been in there for 5 seconds.
And I'm thinking I can put my toes on the side of the boat and get myself up into the boat and into into safety out of the water. And sure enough, there was no bottom of the boat. So I could not get my feet up. I could pull my feet up towards my shoulders, but I couldn't, get myself up over the boat. I just couldn't do it. And and I kept trying and I kept laughing, and I would kind of slip back in. I was like, oh, I'm causing a disturbance in the water, and I'm like, that's going to bring in these piranhas. I was so scared. And so I said, okay, I'm going to swim over to the shore and, just right around to the bank to the shore. And as I did that, I got over there and I realized, oh, there's no shoreline. So what happens is, and it happens in certain areas in Florida here too, when the waterways come through, it's moving water especially, it creates an undercut on the bank. So you've got sort of this overhang, you're a diver, you've got this overhang of land and root systems and everything, and then there's this undercut, right? And I was thinking, oh my gosh, think of all the things that could be living in that undercut, and you're swimming up to it right now. How are you going to get out of this? And so I looked up and there's a small tree that's got a branch that's just a little bit, larger than my forearm. And I was thinking, okay, if I kick really hard once, I can jump up and grab this branch, right, and pull myself up. That I can do because I have decent upper body strength. Yeah, and so I had this great plan all figured out. So let me just preface what I'm about to say next by saying I hate spiders.
You're not the only one. I literally will have my wife kill a spider.
Great soul.
I know, I'm a total disgrace. I'll go in water with sharks. I'll dive with crocodiles. I'll do all kinds of other stuff. I will not. Spiders. I don't like them. Hate them.
Yeah, I feel you, man. Spiders don't do it for me. So they do them to me. I take spiders. So I had this great plan, right? And it was like literally my only plan. And so I'm just trying not to move too much or cause too much of a disturbance. I had no idea what's in that undercut because undercuts are like nurseries sometimes, and you don't know what's going to be under there. And I didn't want to kick something accidentally, like a grouping of roots or something. And so I said, okay, I got one shot at this. And so I scissor kicked really hard. And as I did that, I came up out of the water and I went to grab that branch. And as I did, I circled my hand around it. And as I was laying my hand down, I saw this big spider. It was black and white striped. And I'd never seen anything like it before in my life. I was thinking, oh my God, I'm trying to identify it as I'm grabbing onto it. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to hold on to it right underneath that spider. And I grabbed onto the branch and I had a good hold on the branch and it was nice and sturdy, thank goodness. And then that spider jumped down onto my forearm and I screamed like a 10-year-old girl. And I had to use that momentum that I had, you know, because I didn't want to kick again. I had to use that momentum.
You didn't want to let that go either, right?
Let it go. And I had a spider on my forearm. I was like, you bastard. So I jumped up, I pulled myself up, and I got my toes up on and dug into the dirt, and I was able to pull myself up. And that spider just stood there on me, like daring me to smack it off. And I just like, oh my gosh. And I shook it off of me. And I just was like, my heart was racing, but I was on terra firma. I was okay. And then all of a sudden, like, these flies came in and just started like biting on me. I'm like, oh my God. It was just, it was not worth it.
You're getting attacked by nature.
I was. It's totally, but you know, it's to be expected. So I went back and got my, you know, my carcinogenic bug spray and, you know, coated myself with it. It was just.
I'm not going to get bit by bugs, but I now have cancer.
I know. I escaped the piranhas. I escaped the spider. Only to be eaten by some kind of little tiny gnats and escape them. But now we have
the termites, the spiders, the piranhas. I mean, you know, there's so many things in those jungles that can just hurt you.
And they're out to get you, right? They're out to get you.
Literally, they are. Literally, I mean, it's no fault of their own. That's just how they survive, right? That's their nature. But you know, it's crazy how you know, you go through this, and I mean, it's got to give you a better perspective on life going through these types of,
sure.
You know, and it's like you said earlier, you know, with all the stuff going on right now, you're just like, we'll get through it, whatever. I've had spiders on me. I've dove in water with piranhas, and you know, been through the jungle with warring tribes and Brazil.
You know, I want to share something too that I think is interesting. The women in the tribe, they have these lines tattooed on their face, right? And we didn't get to actually talking with them about what those lines meant, but I have to think that they're milestones, right? It's decorative, and you know, it's a sign of beauty for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but I have to think that it's at certain milestones, because some of the younger women had just a couple of lines, and some of the more mature women had more lines. And these lines were indelible. You know, they faded from a black to a darker blue color, and they are made with. They're not done in a traditional sense of tattoo. So, I mean, when you think of tribal tattoos, you think of something, you know, along the lines of, you know, what you have there in your upper arm, right? The tribal stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you're thinking of, you know.
But these were done with a tattoo gun and a clean environment.
These people whip themselves, okay? So and these tattoos are made with a thorn. It's a certain type of thorn, and I think it's from the peach palm. It's about the length of your middle finger. And while it's extremely rigid, it's not extremely sharp. So they put these, they take these thorns, they make their own ink from that sap that I mentioned, and they burn the sap and collect the soot, and they mix it with river water, and that's their ink. So it's a plant-based ink, and I'm told that that's sort of rare because most tattoo inks are animal-based ink. So this rare ink. So the women tattoo their faces, right? And they tattoo their foreheads and everything. And they use the way that they tattoo is they take this thorn and they stick it into they paint the skin with the line, and then they dip the thorn into the ink, and then they kind of stick it in and lift the skin and let the ink go in, and then they pull it out.
Repeat.
Little tiny dots over and over and over again.
Kind of like a very, very slow tattoo gun.
They gave me a tattoo on my forearm, and I don't know if you can really see that.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of tiny little dots, and that's what makes up the lines. And each of those lines is a poke and lift, poke and lift, poke and lift. And each time they do that, it would bleed. And eventually it just got to be too much, and I couldn't, you know, it just got to be too bloody, and I couldn't really see it anymore. So So I'm told that I'm the first female outside of their tribe to be tattooed by them. So
that's a heck of an honor, right? You've been accepted. So to speak.
Part of the tribe.
Part of the tribe, yeah. You've been accepted. Now, the tattoo you have there, how long did that take? I mean, it's just kind of curious because I know how long mine take, and mine are done with a gun. And I got a lot of stuff, but and they were done with a gun, and it takes several hours. I can, and you're, what you have there and the process you're detailing sounds painful and long.
Yeah, it takes about 10 minutes, just to do something like this.
Okay.
And the women who have their faces done, you can see it. And the women who have their faces done, they actually put stinging nettle on them first. And stinging nettle, of course, inflames the skin and puffs it up. And I can't even imagine like how much that would hurt.
Creates more absorption, right? Is that what it does? Is that why they do it? Create more? I mean, because with inflammation, opens the skin pores, opens everything up.
Right.
I'd imagine the ink would set better.
Yeah. So we were told that they actually put some nettle on their face or the areas that will be tattooed, and then they apply the tattoo by using the thorn. So it's quite painful.
Does not sound fun at all. This does not sound like a fun tribe to go hang out with. I'm sorry. I mean, I've hung out with a lot of people in my life, but
yeah. So the needle, the way that it actually feels is the thorn presses against the skin. You can feel the skin sort of resist, and then because it's not very sharp, the skin actually pops and gives way. So there's a slight popping, and then you can feel the needle, the thorn go in, and then the skin lift a little bit. So it is quite painful. And I mean, to have it done on my forearm was pretty painful. Some folks got it, the guys got it up here.
There's areas of the body that when you get tattooed, I call them very emotional areas, and the forearm is one of them.
Yeah.
Forearms, and the chest here is another.
Yeah.
Those are very, very emotional areas because I don't care how tough you are, you will cry.
Well, thanks for that, because it's the only tattoo I have, and my mom's quite happy about that. I have no other tattoos. I thought about getting one when I was younger, when I was like my late 20s. And I was thinking, I couldn't decide if I wanted, I'm a Pisces, right? So I was thinking, should I get a Pisces tattoo, or should I get something that's, related to diving, a dive flag or something? And I was thinking, I just couldn't decide, and I couldn't decide where to get it. So it's like, if I'm so indecisive about something that's so permanent, maybe I shouldn't do it.
Yeah, and that's always great advice. I tell people that all the time. I said, I have a lot of ink, and some of which is, because once I started when I was young. I got tattoos when I was, pretty young. And, you think about it and you're like, oh, yeah, I want to get this because it means something. Well, one thing you got to realize, and I got most of the stuff I had was all piecework. Now it's all kind of pulled together, but because it's all cover-ups. Everything I have is a cover-up now. But you think about the things and you say, oh, this really means something to me. But what something means to you at 16 years old, not mean anything to you at 25 years old. May not mean anything to you, and as you continue to get older, what means a lot to you changes, right? And, significance changes. So, the reason I pretty much have all the ink I have right now is generally because I wanted to cover things up. And the only way to do that, other than spending thousands and thousands of dollars on removals, which never look quite good anyway. I've never seen a tattoo removal that actually looks like nothing was ever there. It always looks like you can always say, so you traded your tattoo for this white blotch. Right?
Which may or may not be a scar. Right?
Yeah, great idea. I don't know. So I just said I might as well just get more stuff over it. That's kind of what I did. But that's awesome, man. And you spent this time in the jungle with these guys, and and I'm of course joking about that. They don't seem like the funnest people to hang out with. It's just because they have a lot of rituals around pain. It sounds like there's some danger involved in that, but it is so interesting. It is so interesting to the experience that you had. You can't go out and buy that.
No, you can't. And it's we actually went to visit with a shaman. The Matisse tribe lost their shaman a few years ago to a snake bite. And normally it takes years and years to sort of train or apprentice a new shaman, and they just hadn't been in the process. Their shaman was fairly young, and he hadn't taken on an apprentice yet, so they're without a shaman, and they have concerns about that. But we went to go visit another shaman before we went out to go see them. He was near Leticia in Colombia, and so he is part of the Yukana tribe, and the Yukana tribe is pretty modernized. They have quite a lot of contact, and so we learned about how they make their medicine, and a little bit about shamanism and the culture of shamanism specific to the tribes in that area. And he offered us a specific treatment that I want to say that I have heard that this treatment has also been recorded among the old Maya documents and the Maya hieroglyphs, and that is the tobacco powder being blown up into the sinuses. You ever heard about that? No. So there's a theory that the Maya used to practice this, and it was interesting to see that it was still possibly in practice in the same way down in Colombia among the tribes there. And what they do is they take tobacco leaves and they pulverize them down into a really fine powder. And that powder is then applied to a special kind of applicator that is made from the bones of a harpy eagle. And it's got a kind of a ball joint in the middle. It's got these two sort of hollow bones on the outside. And the shaman will take and put some of that tobacco powder down on one side of the pipe or of the applicator. And you put the other side up into your nose. And he blows from his side up into your sinuses. So he blows that tobacco powder through the bones up into your sinuses. And let me tell you, you want to talk about some pain. That pain is unbelievable. That just pure tobacco powder right up into your sinuses. All your sinus cavities just filled with this tobacco powder. It immediately
sounds awful. It just sounds terrible.
Well, let me tell you, it automatically creates this inflammation and this discharge that just runs right down your throat, and you're suddenly choking on it, and it's just this whole crazy experience. But I have never breathed so well in my life in the last 2 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my sinuses have been cleared. I haven't gotten sick, nothing in the last 2 years.
So there's something to it then, I guess, with that. I mean, that's amazing.
It's not something that they're going to be administering down at the hospital down the street.
No, I don't think we'd ever see that in the United States as a medicine for allergies or cold or something.
That one. Yeah. So, it was an incredible experience, and we've got more data to collect. So, arranging another trip to go down to go see them in probably the coming year. We've had to cancel, like all my exploration colleagues, we've had to pretty much cancel our expeditions for 2020, and it can take about a year to a year and a half to arrange a good expedition. So
so you're losing like a whole year, and a lot of people are. I mean, that's a lot of people right now, all their travel plans, and including my own, to go out on different things and do stuff is all kind of up in the air right now, and hopefully by 2021 we're back to normal again. I mean, that's I guess the best we can hope for.
Sure.
Because and I'd mentioned to you, I have a shark trip coming up in January. So if you're interested, or any of your colleagues are interested in coming, let me know, because we always look for more people to go shark diving with. And have you ever been? You said you'd been on a shark feed, right? Have you ever been on a shark feed?
I've dove with sharks down off the coast of Florida, specifically Jupiter. So in the amphitheater dive site, and
off
just
deep
diving in the Caribbean so much, you see them here and there. So it's not like a dedicated shark dive or shark feeding. I've not done one of those. I hear that they can be kind of challenging.
Nah, it'd be fun. What could go wrong?
I like my fingers. No, I haven't done the shark feeding, but I think it would be a great. I could bring my underwater camera gear, and it'd be a great time to do some shark photography.
That's primarily what these trips are. I mean, they're for photographers who like to take pictures and who want to take pictures of sharks. I mean, you get the most. I mean, we could set things up to get the most amazing bite shots. Because that's the shot everybody wants. Everybody wants the shot with the shark with the mouth wide open.
Right.
And basically there, and that the crew knows how to set that stuff up and get you the shots you want. So it's pretty fun. I mean, this last year we had. I mean, we go out every year. At least once a year, and I'll tell you, we had there was a dive. We had 9 tiger sharks, 9 tigers, 2 bulls, and a great hammerhead named Patches. Who, well, she's named Patches by us, and she's there's other people that go out and they call her Pocahontas, so she has 2 names. But she's the only one. You know, one of the amazing things about Tiger Beach, and you know, is that that's the only place that I'm aware of on the planet where you're going to see tiger sharks feeding alongside a hammerhead. Usually they're mortal enemies. Normally the hammerhead sees tiger sharks and they're like, I'm out of here. And this great hammerhead has no fear of them at all. Just kind of comes right into the feed and you know, basically competes with food, you know, with them. So it's pretty amazing to see. And, you know, my goal every year, and I haven't been able to get it yet, is to get 6 species of sharks in one frame.
Oh, okay. In one frame. That's pretty
ambitious. Frame. I've got 4. I may have, well, I got 5 if you count a tail, but but I've gotten 4 in one. I've got 4 species in one frame. Yeah. I'm trying to get all 6 species that exist out there in one frame, which is not an easy task because they don't cooperate.
Yeah. Or you could do that at the amphitheater down in Florida and off of Jupiter.
I don't know. I mean, see, Jupiter's a strange place when you dive down there. It's awesome. I love the diving down there. I go down there a couple times a year. Mm-hmm. Shout out to the Emerald Charters. I go out with them a lot. Captain Randy and Josh Eccles. Great group of guys. We go out to the deep ledge and dive off there. But, you know, it depends on the time of year. All sharks aren't there all the time. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you go out there. I think this is the last month that you'd be able to see tigers out there. If, you know, and then once May's over, they're pretty much gone. Then it's just bull sharks for a while, and then the bull sharks go away, and then it's just lemon sharks for a while. So it's really hard to get that you got to get there just the right time. We have seen a white shark out there once, but it was kind of one of those things where it was really deep, you know, probably about 200 feet down, and, you know, give or take. I mean, I don't know exactly how far it was, but it was pretty deep down, and it was off the deep ledge, so it was pretty far down. And you kind of saw it, and then it was a shadow, and then you knew it was a white shark because they have a certain swim to them. Yeah. I mean, even the shadows, when you see the shadows. And then nobody really got a clear shot of it. And then people said we were lying, so we started posting some stuff of just fake stuff. Joke with people, but you know, I mean, really painfully obvious fake stuff, like us on land with a target with a white shark behind us, kind of, you know. We weren't trying to fake anybody out. We were just goofing off, but yeah, I mean, there was some, but you get some really interesting dives down there too. I love going down. We're going to be going down probably as soon as we can, basically, maybe September. Go down there. So if you're down there, if you happen to be home and you want to come diving and hang out with some fun people and go diving, definitely welcome to come with us. Okay, like I said, that trip for Tiger Beach is I still got a few spots available if anybody wants to come out. So just let me know. You got my contact. So
and it's in January, right?
January 24th to February 1st. We're going to be out. Okay. And it's liveaboard. It's an amazing ship. One of my favorite. I don't take any other cruise out. I don't do any other charters out to Tiger Beach at this point. Mm-hmm. So the Dolphin Dream, shout out to Captain Scott and the crew over there.
And a liveaboard, you got to ask how the food is.
The food is amazing.
Yeah.
I will tell you straight up. I mean, I'll send you some pictures of some of the food. Okay. But yeah, we have a chef. His name is Corey. Guy's amazing. He probably one of the best, other than the shark diving. It's probably one of the best things about the trip you're gonna deal with is the food, because he keeps us fed very well. He's an amazing cook, amazing chef, and cook is not even a word. You got to say chef, you know, because he's definitely that caliber of person.
Yeah, because when you're on a liveaboard, it's like sleep, dive, and eat, right? That's the motto of a liveaboard: is sleep, dive, eat. So you got to
goof on each other. I mean,
there's a lot.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot. This year we have a really, we have a great crew every year, but I have my friends from Holland that are coming in this year too, and they're a bunch of crazy people. They're awesome. My friend is the best baker in Holland, so he comes out and we have a great time. One of my, good dive buddies for years. Him and his wife Sandra come out, and we got a whole bunch of different people that come on these trips, and we have such a great time, goof on each other. And the thing about me and Baz is you'll see us fighting over position for the box, and meanwhile we're pushing each other around into sharks and stuff, and sharks are swimming all over the place. And
right. What's the dive profile like on that? Is it fairly shallow dive, or is it?
It's all shallow. Everything there is shallow. It's generally around, you're going to go 40 feet to maybe 80 at the most. Okay. And 80 feet would be a deep dive. And that's if we go, where the reef is and hang out. Because, we do a lot of sand bottom dives there. So it's a lot of jump down, overweighted. We'll do a few swim arounds. Sometimes I do that. A lot of times just run around on the bottom. I mean, I take my fins off most of the time down there. They don't recommend people do that, but I generally just feel more comfortable with them off if I'm running around on the bottom.
Right.
But if we go over to where the reef is, you'll hit about 80 feet to the bottom. There's a wreck there that we dive on, and we do night dives. So we'll do night dives out there with tiger sharks, which is, insane.
Right. So Tiger Beach is off the Bahamas, and generally that's pretty nice clear water diving.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
That's the beauty of Tiger Beach. I mean, I say this all the time. You could go a lot of places and dive with tiger sharks. You can go a ton of places and dive with all kinds of different sharks. You will not find the visibility of Tiger Beach anywhere else on the planet. And that's
great for underwater photography.
Oh yeah, light is everything.
You need the light.
Light is everything, right? You're a photographer, so knowing photography, I mean, I could take a crappy camera if I have good light, take amazing shots.
Absolutely.
I don't have to. I could have a little Polaroid if I got the right. And I'm dating myself by saying, but I don't even know if they make Polaroids anymore. But I could take a little point and shoot camera, and if I got good light, you can get great shots.
Definitely.
You got crappy light, you could have the best camera in the world and get a terrible shot. I've done that too.
Yeah.
I've done both. So, but Tiger Beach, because of the shallow nature and the clarity of the water, the visibility, and the amount of sun that you get there, and even in January. I mean, January is my favorite time to go there because it's just kind of like the action's really good. Okay. The weather's a little sometimes weird. We don't lose too many days. Usually, there might be a day or two. I mean, the year before last, we didn't lose one day. We dove every single day, 4 times a day. This last year, we lost 2 days because of the weather, because it was a little choppy. When you got 15-foot seas, you don't want to be out there.
Right. No.
So what we do is we'll duck behind an island into a little area where we're protected and just kind of sit behind that if there's a bad day or something. And we have stuff to do. I mean, by that point, hopefully you've taken a bunch of photos. You're sitting there editing photos, laughing with people, goofing with people. I mean, you need that time too. So it's okay if you lose a day here and there. You just don't want to lose a bunch of days. And generally we don't do that. We usually dive a lot.
Well, tell your Danish friend to bring some baked goods, and I'll put it on my calendar.
I've known him for more than a decade, and I've yet to taste his cooking.
Oh,
bastard!
That. I'm in the kitchen.
This year we got a good kitchen there, so this year we're gonna make him cook for us.
That's
I'll make sure, and I'm gonna say this so everybody hears it. Baz, if you're listening, you're gonna be cooking this year. You're gonna make us some pastries or something. We need something from you. I need proof other than Facebook that you're the best baker in Holland.
Yeah. He's got to live up to your hype.
Got to live up to the hype. Well, you know what? I appreciate it so much you coming on. This has been awesome. There's so much more I wanted to get to, but we just kind of I mean, you're such a good conversationalist, and this was a good talk, and we didn't really get off the tribe. I wanted to get into Kilimanjaro a bit. But we have, that could be the topic of the next time you come on. Hopefully you'll be willing to come back on and hang out and talk with me. Like I said, it's a lot of fun having you on, and really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Having me on. It was great, and great to talk to your audience tonight. And this was wonderful. Let's do this again. We'll talk about Kili. We'll talk about NASA. We'll have all kinds of
stuff. I mean, so many things. I mean, we could literally probably talk for 3 or 4 hours.
Easily. Yeah.
I mean, so definitely want to, and I want to include shark diving into your shark feeding at Tiger Beach into your repertoire of amazing travels. I'm sure you will. So.
Right. Okay. We can do that.
We'll make that happen. But awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.